Hi and welcome back. I'm about to go out on a little day hike around town and through the forest as well, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about the 10 essentials. So if you've been backpacking or bikepacking before, you're probably familiar with the 10 essentials, but just in case, it's always important to know that even if you're just going on a short trip, sometimes it's worth having the essentials with you. I mean, it's usually worth having the essentials with you for just in case. And I'm no doomsday prepper or anything like that, but it's just a few little things. It really doesn't take up a lot of space, and these things have come in very handy for me. So I'll go over them really quick, but also stick around to the end because I'm going to give you a couple of stories where they've been essential to me when I'm out in the woods. If you're new here, my name is Kiria, and I'm an avid bikepacker and backpacker. And last year I quit my job to travel around full-time and explore a life of adventure. So let's get started. I'm just going to start pulling things out of my bag because I've packed my bag to get ready to go. So I'm just going to start with the first one, which is water. So no matter where you're going for a hike or how long you're going to be out there, you really should carry water with you. And I would even go one more step further and say that I personally carry either a filter or water purification tablets or something like that, just in case like the bad thing happens, right? I mean, you never know when the weather's going to change, or you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to be stuck in the woods for longer than you thought you were going to be, or just little things like that. And like I said, you don't need to be paranoid all the time that like the worst thing is going to happen to you. And I would definitely encourage you to still go out and do things in the woods because they're not really scary if you are prepared, which is why I'm talking about this now, because being prepared means that you can go out into the woods without worrying too much about something possibly happening. So first and foremost, and very important, is water. And if you've ever heard the rule of threes, it's that you can live without food for 3 weeks, water for 3 days, and air for 3 minutes. So I would say importance would be going the other way. You need air, you definitely need water, and food is important, but that would be the last thing, right? So water. Speaking of food, the next thing, you should always have a little bit of food. So whether that's just a granola bar or some nuts or whatever the little snack is, I think something with high calories and low weight, so peanuts, for example, are a really good example. A Snickers bar is actually one of the things that will give you the most calories and sugar and energy and stuff for a short term at least. But things like that are just easy to throw in your bag, and there's no reason not to have at least one thing. Now for me, like today for instance, I'll probably take some of this bread and some peanut butter and just make a quick sandwich and carry that with me for if I get hungry or if I am out longer than I think I'm going to be. So let's keep going through the bag. So the next thing is a jacket or something to keep you warm. So some sort of weather protection. Personally, today it's quite cloudy out, so I'm going to be carrying my rain jacket, but I also usually carry my puffy. Even if it's summertime, especially if you're in the mountains, the weather just changes so fast. So don't expect that just because it's sunny and clear that it's going to be sunny and clear all day. Or, for instance, where I am right now, it was 90 degrees on one day, and the next day the high was like 60. So you just don't know how it's going to be, so it doesn't really take up that much space to carry a jacket. And this is a little bit heavier weight one. You can definitely get a lot lighter weight ones, but carry a jacket with you no matter what. The other thing I like to have, this is not one of the 10 essentials, but I like to keep like a little waterproof bag. This is a very lightweight DCF, carbon fiber, something like that bag, and I keep my electronics in it or whatever it is, obviously that I don't want to get wet. But I also have a dry bag, and you don't need to have a dry bag if you just have a plastic garbage bag or a bag from shopping or whatever kind of plastic bag you have laying around, like a bathroom trash bag works really well for a smaller bag, or if it's a bigger bag then a kitchen trash bag or even a compactor bag works really well. So either way, I think it's good just to make sure that your things are dry. So the next thing is Navigation. Now, obviously now we use our phones a lot for navigation. I also will sometimes just, if there's an easy paper map of the area, I will carry that around. Or if I'm hiking in the woods or cycling in the woods, I might have just a printout of the one area that I'm going to be in, if it's just a short day trip or whatever. If it's a longer trip, that's obviously a different story. But even when I'm hiking, not so much when I'm bikepacking, but when I'm hiking, I still carry paper maps a lot of the time, because you never know if your phone is going to die or if the satellites are going to be hard to find because of the clouds or whatever. But another thing that I carry that isn't necessarily one of the official 10 essentials is a backup battery pack. So if you are relying on your phone for navigation, it's very important to have a way of charging it. So I always just make sure I have this. And again, I'm just going out on a few hour hike, and I'm going to be close enough to civilization, so you would think, why bother? But you just never know, and it's really not that hard to carry around. So that I will carry around as well. So the next one is sun protection. So for me, that means a hat. That means sunglasses, which I have somewhere here. And that means sunscreen, which is in here as well. Sunscreen. So the next one is light. So even if you're going to just be in the daytime, and currently where I am, it's summertime and it gets light at like 4 a.m. and it gets dark at like 11 p.m. But still, you just never know. You never know. The other thing, which is not one of the 10 essentials, but I always carry with me, is the Garmin InReach. So I guess that could go under the navigation heading, but I think that there's no reason not to have this. Now, again, like I said, I'm in a fairly urban area, so most likely I would be able to get out of the woods and find a person or something, but I have it with me. I might as well just carry it. What's the reason not to? The next thing is a emergency shelter. Now, I currently am carrying two things to kind of make up for that. So I'm not carrying an actual bivy, but you could carry an emergency bivy, and you can get those at REI or wherever. They're quite tiny. They roll up, like this, and they're maybe $25. It's not expensive. But currently I have an emergency poncho and a safety blanket. So instead of carrying a shelter, I will improvise with these two things. The other one of the 10 essentials is a blanket. So this is my blanket for that. And listen, if I'm going out for 2 days, obviously I'm not going to do it with a safety blanket. But a lot of these, basically, I think the most problems that come about are when you're on a shorter hike or biking trip, and you think, well, I'm just going to be gone for a few hours, so you don't really bring that much stuff. So these things are very small. It really doesn't take up much room. And I've actually had to use my safety blanket before. I've actually had to use my emergency poncho before too, as well. So completely worth bringing. As far as shelter goes, I also carry a rope, because if I need to construct a shelter, I will be using the rope to do that. And just because this is something I carry backpacking anyway, I have a carabiner and some attachments for the rope to make a shelter. This probably is a little overkill for a day hike, but I just carry it with me because I already have it in my bag. The next thing is a first aid kit. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I did talk about my first aid kit slightly in a different video, and I got a few questions about what I carry in my first aid kit. I am one who, I think that a lot of things can be made on your own, so I don't carry a huge first aid kit. I think that if you have a very serious injury, then pretty much anything you have in like a basic first aid kit is probably not going to help too much. But I don't want to be blasé about it. I do carry a few things which I think can be used in many different ways. So I carry super glue, which if you get a cut and in a pinch, you could super glue it, and you can put either duct tape on it, or I swear by Leukotape. So Leukotape is an athletic tape that you can use to put over. it actually has many great uses. So if you're starting to get a blister, for instance, you can put Leukotape over the area, so that way your sock or your shoe or whatever isn't rubbing on the skin. But it also is good for wounds. So if you get a wound, you can put a piece of Leukotape over it, and it really is very, very sticky. So once you put it on, it's going to be hard to get off. So just, use with caution. But it's great. Or again, a piece of duct tape will do in a pinch for a lot of things. And that will help you with a gear repair. That will help you put up your emergency shelter. So a piece of duct tape or a little length of duct tape. And I just wrap it around something that I already have. So one of the other things I have with me, which is also one of the 10 essentials, is a lighter. And I wrap a piece of duct tape around the lighter so that I basically already have the duct tape with me. So duct tape and Leukotape. Oh, yes. The other thing I carry for first aid is some pills. Since I'm just going on a day hike, all I have is 3 of them. But, you can carry a couple of aspirin, a couple of ibuprofen. And if you're going on a little bit longer hike, you might want to carry maybe some Pepto-Bismol or something like that. If you're going on a long backpacking trip, I would suggest maybe some Imodium or Pepto-Bismol or something like that as well. But again, like you can have a headache. It's not that big of a deal. I do think that if you're trying to keep swelling down, that's important. So if you fall and you twist your ankle, now what are you going to have that you could use to fix that? So that's when you might need some ibuprofen, and you might use the duct tape. And I didn't finish my first aid thing, but you can use a stick, depending on where you're hiking, to use as a splint. You can use your shirt, or I literally used my shirt. I had a friend who fell and gashed his head open. He hit a rock and it it cut this whole area, and his scalp was flopping. And I took off my thermal shirt and wrapped it around his head and tied it real tight. So, you could rip off the arm of your shirt or a piece of your pants or something like that in a pinch. But if you aren't comfortable with that, or you don't have, if you're wearing a tank top and shorts, then you might want to carry some gauze or something like that as well for your first aid kit. But again, the Leukotape or the duct tape, you could put the gauze and then wrap the tape around, and that is probably better than a Band-Aid in the long run anyway. As far as Neosporin, if you want to carry that, that's probably good too, because it will help with, to get the dirt out and everything. But you could also have hand sanitizer or a sanitizing wipe or something like that. So that's actually, I have a sanitizing wipe. Again, I'm just going out for a few hours, so one should be fine. But if you have hand sanitizer or something antiseptic, that's probably a good thing to clean out the wound as well. Or if you're out backpacking, oftentimes you might have soap, so you can use soap. You can use dish soap if you're out camping. There's a lot of things that you could use for more than one reason. However, since I'm only going on this day trip, obviously I don't have dish soap with me, so I'm going to just carry the one little sanitizing wipe and call it a day. I do also have a needle and thread in case, if you need to do a suture. I also have floss, which despite the fact that I might need to floss my teeth, it's more for sewing something up. So I could sew up a rip or a tear. This is more for bikepacking or camping, because you could sew up a rip in your rain jacket or in your tent or in your tire even. So that's kind of it. And I do have a couple of Band-Aids here, and I have one little thing of moleskin, which, to be fully honest, I've never used because I normally just put a piece of Leukotape over it. You should also carry a knife, and I swear by my Swiss Army knife. I love that thing. It's probably a little overkill because it has 3 different knives or whatever, but I've found that knife to be great. Luckily, I've really only had to use it mostly to cut cheese. If you do need to cut your rope or cut your duct tape or use it to, fashion a hook out of a piece of wood so that you go fishing or something like that for survival, then it is great to have a knife. Okay, so I think I covered everything. I'm going to put them all up on the screen now, all 10 of them. And you can also go to the National Parks website, and there's information about the 10 essentials there. So no, I'm not just making these up. They're actually a list that's made by the Forest Service. So now I have two stories. One story, the first story, is one time when I'm really glad I had the 10 essentials. So I was in Switzerland. I was doing a day hike, and I went up into the higher regions, maybe around 9,000 feet. And when I left my place, it was nice. It was a nice day. It was sunny, no problems. I hiked up the hill through like the flowers and everything and the birds singing, and it was a lovely day. And I got up to 9,000 feet and it started snowing. And of course, I said, okay, well, I want to be careful. I'm by myself. And so I'll start heading down. So I start heading down, but unfortunately at the lower regions, the snow was rain, cold rain, heavy rain, and I took a wrong turn. So I did have a rain jacket. I did have rain pants. I put them on. Luckily, I had the stuff. I had all my gear. I had all my 10 essentials. So I was ready, but that area of the Alps didn't have any trees, so it's not like I could take shelter from the rain or anything like that. So I was pretty exposed. So setting up a shelter in that area would have been a pain, but luckily I had carried my rain gear, and I had carried my headlamp because it kind of started to not get dark because it wasn't really too late, but it was starting to be heavily cloudy, so it was kind of dim. And I was pretty much by myself. I didn't see anybody else. This was probably like middle of September, the beginning or middle of September. So not like the high hiking season or anything like that. And again, I had hiked up from a town called C, so I was within hiking distance of the town and all downhill. But I did take a little bit of a wrong turn at one point, and I was doing a loop, which is a problem. When you do an out and back, you kind of go back the same way, so it's not as big of a deal. But I was doing this loop, and I don't think it was that I was actually lost, but that I was going to take longer than I thought I was going to take. So when I did the turn, it was taking me on a longer route back than the route that I had gotten there. So I just kind of steeled myself for the fact that I was going to be walking for a long time in the rain because it was raining hard. But like I said, I had all the gear, so I was prepared for it. But luckily there's a happy ending to this story. And the fact is they were doing construction on this road at one point. So I was walking down and I noticed like all these guys doing construction. And I started asking them, in German, do they speak English? And it was like, no. And the next guy, no. And the next guy, no. Oh, I wasn't in Switzerland. I was in Austria. That's right. And finally, I got one guy who kind of spoke English, and he told me that, yes, I was on the right track to town, down the hill, right? So I was like, okay, good. Because I knew that, but I still was really happy to have the confirmation. Anyway, so I started walking back down to town, and this truck pulls up aside of me, and these guys open the window and say to me in German, probably, if I want to ride. And obviously I don't speak German, but I could tell they were saying like, get in the back. And I was like definitely taking them up on that. So I got in the back. I was soaked. And at this point, I had a rain jacket that was kind of old, and it was starting to get wetted out easily. And so I was wet inside as well as out. So I probably could have walked down the hill to the town, but I would have been miserable. And I don't think I would have died, but I would have felt miserable. And so these guys gave me a ride, as wet as I was with all my wet crap in the back of their car. And I was so thankful. So yes, I got lucky this time, but it would have been a really difficult walk down the hill. So in that case, I did have the 10 essentials, but my main essential of my rain jacket was not really up to par. So after that, I actually bought a new rain jacket, and so glad I did, because I learned the hard-ish way, but not as hard as it could have been. So, and then the next story is one where I actually didn't have all the 10 essentials. Well, so I went running in Yosemite with some friends of mine, and we were going to do, again, a big loop, where the loop can kind of get you in trouble because you think that the second half is going to be just as easy as the first half, but it's not always, right? So sometimes it takes longer than you think. So anyway, we were going to do this maybe like 20-mile loop, and we did the first half, and it was great, and there was even water along the way, no problem, but we had water. We all had hydration packs, a couple liters each. And then we started going back on the second half, and it got hot, and it's very dry in the Sierra Nevadas. And so it's just, you're at high elevation, and it's kind of hot, and it's dry, and so you get dried out really easily. And we basically went through our water faster than we thought. And none of us had brought a filter because we were idiots, because we thought the run was going to take us a few hours, and it ended up taking us a lot longer than we thought. And then the trail that we were going to go on ended up being, it was on the map, but it was like decommissioned because of a fire or something. So we had to kind of bushwhack at the end. And very luckily, we came across a parking lot, and there were a bunch of people there, and one lady gave us water. But that was really stupid of us. We should have been carrying a filter or some tablets or more water. I mean, again, luckily we learned from that, and now I always carry a filter, and I carry tablets also in case my filter breaks. So that's a little redundant maybe, but you know, when you've had one time where you're just so thirsty, and I considered drinking out of the stream without filtering it, which would have probably been a bad idea, but you know, we were getting kind of desperate, but we survived and we learned from it. So I'm telling you these stories so that you don't have to learn on your own. You can learn from my mistakes. Just carry the 10 essentials and carry a few little backups, like I said, like a filter or tablets. They're very easy. You can get iodine tablets, and they're super tiny, or chlorine tablets. They're very, very tiny, and you just throw it in the water, and you have to wait a little bit before you drink it. But they'll save you, and you think you're fine until something goes wrong, and then you realize that you should probably be carrying more stuff. So there you go. That's my long-winded story about why you should carry the 10 essentials, even if you're on a short trip, just a day trip, or a trip you think is going to be a few hours. So thank you very much for watching, and happy trails.